how do you think you have approached or handled romantic relationships up until this point in your life?
Yeah. Oh man. Very, very, very poorly. I think because I was cheated on so much, like I had really bad or I was cheated on and I saw cheating in my family that I thought was so perfect. So like
Right.
this whole like thing of infidelity for me was just like I'm going to get cheated on. Like, it's going to happen.
When I jump from situation to situation, I'm kind of robbing myself of that opportunity to learn. Because number one,
Mm,
now I'm with you. So I didn't take the time to figure out why didn't we work? Because now
mhm.
I'm looking at you. I'm saying, hey, I need to learn you. I need to figure things out with you. So I'm actually not taking the opportunity to say, what was Sydney doing that helped the relationship fall apart? What was I doing that made the relationship fall apart? Let me
Mhm.
work on addressing those concerns so that way when I'm with you now, greater chance it's going to be successful. So, kind of following that train of thought, then, right? So, we talked about if we're not taking care of ourselves or if we're thinking we have to be there for everybody else, then we know there's not a lot in the tank left for us,
Yeah.
right? So, thinking about how that's maybe, yeah, you've maybe experienced that so far in your life, right? How do you think you have approached or handled romantic relationships up until this point in your life?
Yeah. Oh man. Very, very, very poorly.
Okay.
Um, I think what I will say is I think it seems like I have it all. Well, not everything. Okay. Like I'm not trying to like toot my own horn, but like I think like it seems like I have things figured out, right? Like whatever. I went to school, I got a good job, I like moved, I have my own apartment, I have my own car, I like take care of myself. I do the whole whatever not like
Being an independent adult.
yeah, yeah, sure.
Got it.
But let's talk about romantic relationships. Like
Okay. Let's
I
talk about them.
like oh man. Um so like the first relationship that I got into, I don't know how I'll go pretty deep into this one, but um this was like when my parents were like going through like the thick of it. And at this point I had to like not had to, but my parents like really like at that point they wanted me to like meet their significant others. Now I really didn't want to, and like I feel like I was being forced to. So I just like needed somebody there with me. Like I didn't want to do it alone. And like
Yeah.
I would just anyways, I ended up getting into a relationship with like basically the first person that like wanted to be in a relationship with me and had their own like place. I was 18, 19 at the time. Um 18, I think.
Okay.
um and that just relationship like I already grew up not having the best self-esteem and not feeling like, you know, like good enough or whatever the case was. And
Right.
you know, he just like tripled that. Like he would,
Mm.
you know, just make tons of comments about like my physical appearance. A lot of times it was about my weight, which he knew was like a big insecurity of mine.
Mm.
He would like force me to do things that I didn't want to, like a lot of things.
Mhm.
To the point where I actually ended up like getting pregnant. I
Mm.
had an abortion, which I think is also important to talk about. That it's okay to do it because I not like oh I'm encouraging everybody to go get an abortion, but like I do want to say that like growing up Christian, I went to private Christian school. I grew up in a like religious, so to speak, household.
Mhm.
So that was like difficult for me thinking about that, thinking that one through because I was like,
Yeah.
well, like God wouldn't want me to do this and like this isn't the right thing to do. I spent a lot of time like praying about it because I still like have my faith, but I think to me it's more about having faith and having a relationship with God as opposed to like being religious.
Mm.
Um and anyhow, I feel super at peace with my decision. And I still believe in God. I think He's forgiven me. And like I don't like a lot of times they'll kind of put that narrative out there that like, oh, you'll regret your decision and you'll feel so like sad the whole time. And granted, there are some women who do, and I'm not here to speak for every woman's experience. I'm
Sure.
only here to speak for my own. But I will say that like I definitely made the right decision for me. And like, you know, um, but anyways, to continue that, like that relationship was really horrible. And at that point, that was kind of the turning point for me where I was like, okay, like Sydney, seriously, like, what are you doing? I was telling myself going into that relationship how much I didn't want it to end up like my parents. I didn't want my parents' relationship. I wanted something so different. I want something that's going to last. So I
Yeah.
stuck through anything and everything. He cheated on me so many times. Like, I stuck through everything just because I thought, like, I'm going to make this relationship work. I'm going to make it last. He
Right.
loves me. And that was wrong. It wasn't until like it was a year. And it sounds like for all that to happen in a year is kind of impressive on his part. But anyways, like it was bad, but literally I didn't give myself any time after the relationship to heal, and I got
Mhm.
into another relationship right away, which doesn't sound like the apple falls too far from the tree. Um and then I got into another relationship that was unhealthy. Not that he was like emotionally abusive in any like regard. He was like better to me, but like I had really bad like I think because I was cheated on so much, like I had really bad or I was cheated on and I saw cheating in my family that I thought was so perfect. So like
Right.
this whole like thing of infidelity for me was just like I'm gonna get cheated on. Like, it's gonna happen. Um so I was with him for a year, the second guy, and I think we spent maybe 2 days apart. Like we were together every single day and we didn't have our own places. So if he was staying with me and like because my parents weren't really home at the time, like he was staying with me in the house, or like I was staying with him and his family who was probably tired of me. Like it was just we didn't give each other any space. That caused a lot of problems too.
Mm.
Like it just got really unhealthy. Like we weren't even our own people
Yeah.
at one point. Like um so that was bad. Then I finally took some time to just like breathe and figure it out and just be single and just enjoy being single. And then I got
Mhm.
to the point where I was like really comfortable being single. But then I developed, I think in that first relationship, I developed this like mentality that I need to like hurt people before they can hurt me.
Mm.
And
Okay.
like I um yeah. And I also thought that I wasn't deserving of like a good love. Like that I only deserved like I don't know. I
Pain?
don't know what I was thinking. Say that again. Sorry.
Pain?
Yeah, pain. Yes, yes. I didn't think I deserved anything good. And so yeah, some time passed. And then I was on a dating app and I ended up meeting um a guy who's actually from New York, which is part of the reason I moved to New York.
Okay.
And he was on vacation in LA on vacation in LA at the time, and like he treated me so much like more different or so much differently than all of like anybody that I had ever been with before. Like
Mhm.
he was like a man, and I like never thought that I was good enough for that. So the fact that I was getting it, like I at first was like, oh well, this isn't. He's just gonna want to hook up, and like that's that. And I was already like, I made peace with that in my mind. Like okay, well he's just gonna like that's it. That's all that's gonna happen. And he ended up like pursuing me even after he left, and like I flew out here to see him over here, and like I was like, wow, like this guy is like he's great. Um, but in the back of my head, I'm thinking he doesn't really like me. He doesn't like there's no way that like I'm good enough for this relationship or
Mhm.
whatever thoughts that I was putting in my head.
Yeah.
Um, which led to a bunch of things that I completely regret. Not to say that he was, you know, everybody has their own flaws, right? But I'm not here
Mhm.
to like talk crap on him because I think he was great. But like we were together for 2 years, but a lot of things happened in the relationship. A lot of like I cheated. Um
Okay.
and he found out he like also not good on his part, but he like downloaded my iCloud library. It just got really like toxic. Um and I think we tried to make it work and like couldn't. It just
Mm.
no matter like I think the trust was so broken and
Yeah.
there were just you know what actually we spoke before like all this and you had mentioned something about like know what your like deal breakers are before you go into a relationship.
I did. I did.
Yes. And like that resonated with me so much because I definitely knew already what some of my deal breakers were when I got into this relationship, but I like ignored them. And despite him
Mm,
being a great man, like there were some things that like I saw and I noticed that were a huge problem throughout the relationship, like family being family oriented and wanting to be like part of my family and become like, become like part of my family and like be involved with my friends and stuff like that. And I felt like he didn't want to do that with me. Like he didn't want to, and he didn't want me to be involved in his life and with his friends. And like, I felt very like everything in his life was compartmentalized and I was just one chunk of it. And like, I didn't
right.
feel included. And then, yeah, like, oh, and then also just like my faith, right? Like, I think that that was also important to me. Like, even if somebody doesn't believe in God, that's fine. Like, I don't have to be with somebody who believes in God per se, but I need to be with somebody who's gonna at least like co-parent with me in a way that like it's okay. Like, we can. I don't want to confuse our kids, but like, I don't know, figure out how to make that work. I think that was also
Of
always a
course.
conversation. So, bottom line to like end this here, like I would say that like I still like love him. Like I think I do. And we got or not I think I do. I know I do. We recently fairly recently broke up. But I don't and I think we talked about this too. Like I don't know that like if that love is enough to make the relationship last, despite how much I want it to. With the
Okay.
differences.
Absolutely. We're going to definitely dig into that a little bit more in terms of the context of that point you just mentioned. But
Yeah.
I want to touch on some of the things. I made a couple little points while you were discussing that. So you mentioned ignoring deal breakers, right? You
Mm-hmm.
mentioned hurt others before they hurt you.
Yep.
And you also mentioned in the first two relationships that you were not taking enough time in between,
Mm-hmm.
right? So let's break some of those down because I think that they're very important points that you're mentioning. So usually, like when we, and this is all my perspective. I'm not basing this off of anything other than my anecdotal experience and evidence of other people that I've worked with and that I've spoken to. But when you don't take a lot of time in between relationships, what I find is that there's not that opportunity to not only learn how to sit in your emotions and truly reflect, because hurt and pain can be good motivators to actually do something about them, to
Mm-hmm.
actually grow, to be better, to learn from situations. But when I jump from situation to situation, I'm kind of robbing myself of that opportunity to learn. Because number one,
Mm-hmm.
now I'm with you, so I didn't take the time to figure out why didn't we work. Because now
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at you, I'm saying, hey, I need to learn you, I need to figure things out with you. So I'm actually not taking the opportunity to say, what was Sydney doing that helped the relationship fall apart? What was I doing that made the relationship fall apart? Let me
Mm-hmm.
work on addressing those concerns so that way when I'm with you now, greater chance it's going to be successful, right?
Yeah.
So if we're jumping, no time to do that, because a lot of times I find that we just kind of don't want to be by ourselves. So it's just like, hey,
Yeah.
I'll take you, right? So that's the reason why we'd want to address that. Then you mentioned hurting others before they hurt you. I think that's significant only in the context of if I'm operating from that framework, right? Then it kind of makes it seem like I'm coming into this relationship knowing maybe there's some things I need to address, but I'm not willing to address them yet. And you're going to pay the cost for it
100%.
because I don't have the confidence in you. Not that you did anything wrong, but because of my past hurt,
Mm-hmm.
I'm bringing that to the forefront in this relationship right now. So
Yeah.
now you have to pay the cost for that. And so it can kind of come off as being unfair because you don't actually know what to address, meaning the other person. They don't know what to address with you. They just know something's kind of off over time. And they just end up kind of becoming that learning experience for you instead of you taking that time, like we said, in between to learn, grow, then get into the healthy relationship because I understand more or less what I'm looking for and what I need from you. And then lastly, tying that up, ignoring the deal breakers. So what are deal breakers, right? So let's explain that. In my opinion, deal breakers just mean things that you know you cannot deal with, you cannot tolerate if they're broken, right? If you know these things and you still put yourself in that position, what can that mean? I'm inherently creating a riskier probability that it's not going to work, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I want something to work for the long term, I cannot afford to ignore a deal breaker. I'll give you one of mine, right? Communication is the highest order to me. There's no way I can be with somebody who does not want to communicate, because 99% of the issues that I see, both personally and professionally, can be boiled down to lack of communication or miscommunication for a lot of folks. And it ends up creating this very challenging environment where we're not willing to see each other's perspective. We're not willing to listen to why you feel the way that you feel. So it just makes it easier and easier to diverge, and we're probably not going to make it.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you sharing a lot of those points, because I think the audience needs to hear those things. We all need to be reminded of those things, simply because a lot of us do them. We jump because we don't want to be lonely, right? We hurt because we're afraid of being hurt, because maybe we got hurt already. We're ignoring stuff that we know we probably shouldn't be, because maybe, again, we want somebody now. So I know that's a red flag, but I'll push it to the side right now. Maybe we can work through that later.
Right.
And a lot of cases I find that we're unsuccessful, and then the cycle can end up repeating itself.
Yep.
Anything else you want to add on that point?
Yeah. And I think also, like you mentioned, the other person ends up becoming like the learning experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also, like, I also take a lot of like guilt with that too, because I realized, like, I know I wasn't ready to be in a relationship, like, with, my last relationship that I was in. And I did it anyways because I liked him and I wanted to be with him, but I hadn't done any of the work that I needed to do. And then I think along the way, like, he ended up having to deal with the consequences of my like unhealed traumas. And like, that's not his, I mean, like, I just have a lot of guilt for that. Like, I feel bad. And I mean, yeah, like I think also, like, I've been saying this like recently just about that like relationship and part, like specifically like where I'm at now. Like, I wish I could just like start all over and like erase memories and like just do it better. But like, unfortunately, you can't. Like, that's not life. That's not how life works. But like, I'm like, damn, like, I'm sitting with this thought, like, if you could just like really, if you could take back time, like, but
that goes back to the old hindsight adage. I use the concept. I actually believe I'm going to validate what you said, but I'm going to give you a different perspective on it. I actually think the pain is good. The reason why is because I think, I'm going to speak for a lot of men that I know. I don't want to speak for women, but I will speak for a lot of men.
Yeah.
A lot of us, because we're not like equipped for a very long period of time to know how to be emotionally intelligent and know how to describe how we're feeling and really feel comfortable to communicate that and share that to our female partners. For those of us that are heterosexual, it causes us to have a lot of pain and a lot of suffering. And what can happen is, unfortunately, we get to the point where we have to lose that person, and then some of the ideas become clear. And then we decide and realize, hey, I need to go work on this. I need to go and get some help with this person, because I recognize that I'm ill-equipped to do it on my own.
Yeah.
I actually think pain is a great motivator. The same way, not that I'm wishing for it, but if there's no bad, then there's no good.
Yeah.
Right? If you don't hurt at times, then you don't appreciate when you're not hurting. You don't appreciate the fact that you've learned how to cope better, that you've learned to grow with the situation, that you've learned to cultivate and create a support system to help you through difficult times, which we will all go through.
Yeah.
So I would say to you, I actually think it's more important that you remember those painful memories and those painful experiences, not to torture yourself, but to remember. So if you find yourself in another situation, you're like, man, I really like this person. They really seem like they're a great fit for me. I don't want to mess this up.
Yeah.
Because I remember how I used to be. I remember how I used to approach the situation. I don't want to put us in that situation. So I'm going to be better this time.
Right.
I'm going to do what I need to do, which is why when we mentioned a moment ago, if I take the time in between relationships to work on me, I am more complete, which means I'm more prepared to welcome you into my life. If you're doing the same thing,
Yeah.
that might be an expectation. You're ready to welcome me and us try to figure out how to blend our lives together. But we
Mm.
have to do that work. None of all that is predicated on the work got to be done. If it's not, it's going to be way harder to go through that because it's extra barriers and more hurdles that we end up having to jump over. But we're the ones that are creating